Humans, in one way or another, fear death, and the horror genre plays on said fears to elicit visceral reactions from its audience. But what if the characters embrace their demise in order to achieve a much-needed victory against the antagonistic forces? Ideally, a character dying in a feature might symbolize defeat and the ultimate loss, but this is not necessarily always the case, as there are those rare times where victory might only be achieved by making the ultimate sacrifice. I'm Sean Ferrick for What Culture Horror, and here are 10 horror movie characters who had to die to win. Number 10. Lee Abbott, A Quiet Place. Serving as director John Krasinski's stunning breakout feature, A Quiet Place is rightfully regarded as one of the best horror movies of the late 2010s. A combination of wonderful performances, excellent sound design, and its concept led to the film becoming a critical and commercial success, giving way to a solid franchise and place in current pop culture. A Quiet Place's exploration of parenthood in the face of adversity, in this case the sound-seeking death angels, reaches its emotional peak in the third act, where family patriarch Lee Abbott, played by Krasinski himself, sacrifices himself in order to save his children Regan and Marcus from impending doom at the hands of the vicious extraterrestrials. Lee does so by yelling in order to draw the creature's attention away from the young siblings, but not before reaffirming his love for a guilt-ridden Regan. Said creature attacks him, but in the process the children are able to escape in their father's truck. This victory, although small-scale in nature, is in line with the story's familial themes and intimate scope. In short order, Lee is able to give his children a second chance at life, despite the overwhelming odds they would have to face. Number 9. John Nada, They Live. Initially regarded by contemporaneous critics as ham-fisted attempt at social commentary, John Carpenter's wonderful horror comedy They Live has seen a more favourable reception in the decades since its release. The 1987 film has effortlessly quotable dialogue, game performances, especially from Roddy Piper and Keith David, an outrageous but knowing tone, and interesting thoughts on consumerism, Reagan-era policies, and capitalist exploitation. After drifter John Nada, played by Piper, and his colleague Frank, played by David, join the anti-alien resistance, the duo make their way to a facility where the would-be otherworldly conquerors are broadcasting a signal that hides their appearances and deeper messaging. Following a skirmish with police officers and their double-crossing by ally Holly, played by Meg Foster, Frank dies, but not before Nada is able to destroy the transmitter, sending out the aforementioned signal. Unfortunately, he is mortally wounded in the process, but his death is not in vain, as the world sees the truth behind its once-hidden overlords. In addition to the material gains because of his actions, Nada's demise has symbolic weight as well due to his defiance, best exemplified by him giving the aliens the middle finger, demonstrating the capacity of everyday people to challenge the status quo. Number 8. Sheriff Eben Olesen, 30 Days of Night. This 2007 graphic novel adaptation is no genre classic, but directors David Slade, starred Josh Hartnett and Melissa George, and the rest of the creative talent were able to craft a solid horror feature with the requisite atmosphere, tone, and overall bleakness. One of its few truly standout moments, beyond its impressive tracking shot of the carnage brought about by the vampire's attack, is the death of Sheriff Eben Olesen, played by Josh Hartnett. After a grueling month of trying to fight off the invasive undead beings, Olesen realizes that the only way to fight off the vampires is to become one himself in order to protect his wife Stella, played by George. His plan is successful as he is able to defeat the vampire leader Marlowe, played by a fantastic Danny Houston, after a brutal bout, but it comes at the cost of his own life as the Alaskan polar night that enabled the vampire attack comes to an end. Admittedly, the ending is bleak, given that Stella and Eben had only just reconciled during the attack, but it fits the rest of the movie's tone and drives home Eben's love and commitment to his once estranged wife. Number 7. Sophie, Lights Out. An impressive feature-length directorial debut from David F. Sandberg, 2016's Lights Out is a well-crafted, well-acted, low-key horror feature with ideas of mental health struggles and familial dysfunction on its mind. It manages to use its thematic content to turn the oft-utilized fear of darkness into something both spine-chilling and emotionally resonant. The latter is especially evident in the movie's exploration of Sophie, played by Maria Bello, whose childhood ties to the malevolent ghost Diana, played by Alicia Vela Bailey, threaten to wreak havoc on her family. This comes to a visceral end when it becomes clear that Sophie must end her life in order to spare her children from the wrath of her spectral former friend. She does so by shooting herself in the head, therefore severing Diana's ties to the world of the living. It comes as no surprise that this ending was riddled in controversy due to its perceived glorification of death by suicide. Sandberg defended his narrative choice in an interview with the AV Club, where he stated that the then-in-development sequel, which now might not get made, would address the consequences of Sophie's sacrifice. Number 6. Ellen Hutter, Nosferatu, 1922. Much has been said about this pioneer of not only horror, German expressionist cinema, and cinema in general, and with good reason. F.W. Murnau's towering work revolutionized the horror genre due to its visual style, contribution to vampiric tropes, chilling subject matter, and of course, Max Schreck's terrifying performance as Count Orlok. As the motion picture story progresses, Orlok takes a frightful interest in his visitor, Thomas Hutter's hometown of Visborg, and his time there is marked by death due to his plague-inducing presence. Hutter's wife, Ellen, learns of Orlok's weakness, the blood from a woman of pure heart, and invites the vampire to her home in order to end his reign of terror, but at the cost of her own life. It can be argued that the means behind Orlok's defeat are a bit antiquated and serve as a prime example of Ellen's objectification, but it was also clear that she had agency in her actions, actively learning the means to defeat Orlok and save her town from the supernatural wrath of his presence. Number 5. Nancy, the Final Girls. Falling in the relatively small but steadily growing subgenre of meta-horror movies, 2015's The Final Girls is a fun homage to 80s slasher movies, with a surprisingly solid emotional core holding together the gallows humour and genre staples. After the plot's central group is transported to the world of Camp Bloodbath, the movie within the movie, they find themselves in the crosshairs of the picture's slasher antagonist, Billy Murphy. The machete-armed villain makes short work of the group and the fictional characters he shares a world with before Nancy, played by Malin Ackerman, sacrifices herself to give protagonist Max, played by Thaisa Farmiga, the ability to stop Billy's reign of terror by becoming the final girl. Nancy's selfless act worked well as a means to add layers to the well-worn trope of the final girl, and also gave Max a chance to bid her mother Amanda, who plays Nancy in Camp Bloodbath, a fitting farewell. Although the group somehow finds itself in the sequel Camp Bloodbath Cruel Summer, and against a revived Billy, Max is now able to take on the villain with her newfound strength. Number 4. Suk Woo, Train to Busan. 2016's Train to Busan is one of the most daring additions to the zombie subgenre of the 2010s, with its social commentary serving as a strong backbone for its terrifying set pieces and strong emotional hook. So impressive is its stature that its sequel could not match its high quality, and its American remake is yet to get off the ground almost 9 years after the original's release. After the bulk of the train-based carnage has occurred, protagonist Suk Woo, played by Gong Yoo, realizes that he has been infected with a zombie-causing illness, and is slowly beginning to turn into a zombie himself. In order to save his daughter Su-an, played by Kim Su-an, and fellow passenger Sung Kyung, played by Young Yu-mi, from being infected, the once cynical father jumps off the train after ensuring his daughter and acquaintance are safe aboard the transport. This act serves as the culmination for Suk Woo, who up until the events of the film was a detached workaholic who almost never cared for the well-being of others or took the time to understand them. Number 3. Ophelia, Pan's Labyrinth. Without a doubt, Guillermo del Toro's magnum opus, Pan's Labyrinth is a harrowing yet beautiful look into the realities of living in Francoist Spain through the eyes of a child who learns the value of disobedience as she further explores the fantastical world that serves as a brief respite from the fascistic society she lives in. After Ophelia, played by Ivana Baquero, and her mother Carmen, played by Ariadne Gil, move to ruthless phalangist Captain Vidal, played by Sergi Lopez's home, the former begins to explore a fantasy world where she encounters the likes of the Faun and the Pale Man, both played by Doug Jones, and other mythological beings. Unfortunately, Ophelia's life in the real world drastically worsens, and this comes to a semi-tragic conclusion after Vidal shoots her for taking her brother away from him. However, Ophelia's death was not in vain, as she sacrificed herself to prevent harm from coming to her brother, and more importantly, ensure her ascension to her role as Princess Moana in the fantasy underworld. Number 2. Ellen Ripley, Alien 3. Alien 3 is a puzzling film that suffered enormous interference behind the scenes, so there is not really much fault of a young David Fincher or a game's Sigourney Weaver for how it eventually turned out. Instead, the majority of the feature's woes fall at the feet of 20th Century Studios, then obviously 20th Century Fox, who in typical studio fashion butchered the final cut into a mess that was put out into theaters in 1992. In a way, this is one of the few sacrifices on this list that was somewhat undone by a movie sequel due to Ellen Ripley's cloning in 1997's Alien Resurrection. But since the original Ripley is dead, it also works for the purpose of this list. After surviving yet another alien attack, the Nostromo survivor realizes that she has an alien queen egg incubating inside her. Worse still, she learns that Wayland Yutani will use said egg to create xenomorph-enhanced biological weapons, meaning she had to destroy it at all costs. Due to the intervention of the all-encompassing megacorporation, including the human inspiration behind Bishop, Ripley had to take a fatal dive into the molten pit at the Fiorina 161 prison foundry complex in order to destroy the infant xenomorph queen. Number 1. Father Damien Karras, The Exorcist. Yet another classic whose reputation at the time of its release was mixed. The Exorcist is a stunning and truly terrifying cinematic effort from ace director William Friedkin, filled to the brim with an unsettling tone, grimy atmosphere, and chilling performances, especially from Linda Blair as possessed child Regan McNeil. The Exorcist also features one of the most intense self-sacrifices in the horror genre, with Jason Miller's Father Damien Karras letting the evil Pazuzu take over his body in order to both spare Regan from endless torment and to vanquish the vile spirit. This act was driven by Father Karras' rage at the sight of his deceased colleague Father Merrin, played by Max von Sydow, as well as the realization that Pazuzu would not relent under normal circumstances. Once the spectral being takes over the Jesuit psychiatrist, the latter jumps through a window and takes a brutal fall down a nearby flight of stairs, ending his life and Pazuzu's as well. This sacrifice served as a fitting end to Father Karras' arc, who before his demise questioned the validity of his faith and had it restored throughout the movie's chilling events.